Hello everyone, Shroomraver here, and welcome back to Let's Make a Mini. This is the series where I'm going to be taking some of our favourite characters from the world of video games, movies, TV, comics, anything like that, and making them as playable D&D or TTRPG minifigures right here on Hero Forge. Yes, indeed. Yes, back again for another one of these. On Hero Forge, as I say, I always like to plug this as much as I can. Hero Forge, the site I'm using, the link in the description below is where I'm making these miniature figures. Now, we went to League of Legends last time for Caitlyn, and this time we're going to be looking at a different game franchise entirely, and we're going to try and create Cloud from the Final Fantasy games. This is what I've always looked forward to. There are some very specific things on Hero Forge that will really work for this character. So without further ado at all, let's make a mini. So, starting off as we so often have with the human male. Now, looking at the head, not too much we really want to change here. His expression, we're going to make him as expressionless as possible. He is very stoic. He doesn't have a smile much. He doesn't really have a lot of anger all the time. He's basically just quite passive-faced. So there's not a lot to change there. What we can do is, for the first time of probably what might be a few of these various characters, we're going to use the anime spike hair, because as you can see, that is very Cloud. It could have been based off him. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to do with the hair. There's no facial hair to go off here. In terms of the bodywork, we've got the human torso, which is fine. We can make him a little bit more muscular, just a touch. Like, Cloud isn't like hugely built, but you know, he's well built enough. And again, not a huge amount we really need to change him. What we might do is bring the weight down a little bit. That way we can balance it with how naturally muscular he is, but bring his weight class down a little bit, which I think is going to work quite well here. And once again, I know we're very short into the video, but again, there's not a whole huge amount we need to do with the body here. When it comes to creating like sort of human characters, as it were, there's really not vast amounts we need to change. Now, there are characters I have in mind where we are going to be using different forms of the body. You know, we might be using some of the more, I don't know, demonic features or stuff like that. But realistically, with the ones we've done so far, they are human. And there's, well, aside from our first one, Kratos, but he's kind of a god. But he has the human form. So there's not a huge amount we've ever really needed to change. We will be exploring this later on in certain videos. But for now, we're just going to stick with what we've got. Which means, of course, we can get onto the fun stuff. We can start building Cloud with his clothing, gear, and colours. So in terms of clothing, there are things I have in mind here. Obviously, there's going to be no headwear. We are going to come back to the shoulder issue, but we're going to get his main clothes done first. Now, we all know the kind of clothes Cloud does wear, and there's something very nice for him. Down sort of towards the bottom area, we have, yeah, here it is. We have, in this kind of area, we have some of the more modern stuff. After the armor, we've got like this biker stuff. We've got bulletproof vest, which could be quite nice for him. But this is where we're looking. We're looking into the tactical armor area. So we've got the tactical top, the tactical armor, but we're going to be using this one, which is the sleeveless chest armor. And that's going to work really nicely for Cloud. He has, at best, he has short sleeves. And these little sort of armband parts are going to come in quite nicely. But that is not a bad look for what he's wearing on top. For the legs, we're going to go simple. The peasant pants will work perfectly well. The belt here, actually, you know, it's marketed as like these peasant pants, but the belt here actually could be seen as being kind of futuristic as well, which is the kind of the aesthetic we're going for with Cloud. And in terms of feet, again, we want to be futuristic, and there is actually a perfect option for him somewhere down here. It's called the futuristic boots. And I'm going to hope I don't go behind. These are the ones. Yeah, there we are. Cuffed futuristic boots. That's pretty good for Cloud. You know, they're not coming up too far. He doesn't wear these sort of big, massive, like knee-length boots or anything. That's perfect. That's all we really need for him. And in terms of gloves, we're going to keep it simple. The very first option, the Thief's Leather Glove. It's kind of got a little bit of padding there. It's not like a gauntlet. So that's going to work quite nicely. Now, one thing about Cloud that we don't have right here is he has a kind of a shoulder piece on I think his left shoulder, that kind of thing, with screws and nails coming out of it. Now we can't get that exactly, but we are going to try for a couple of reasons. The main reason, I think, being because I'm pointing at the screen, that's not going to help you. Obviously there is no sleeve here, it's just bare shoulder. And we're going to try and combat the fact that there's no kind of short sleeve going on with this shoulder piece. So a lot of these are built more towards the medieval kind of thing. But if we go down quite far, you'll see that we get into this kind of futuristic look in certain areas. And the one we want is this, the riveted shoulder armour. Now, under normal circumstances, this would add to both shoulders, and it doesn't look very good. But if we click this, we can unlink them. We'll remove the one on the right, we'll keep this one on the left, and this is going to be a good example of how we can edit very specific parts of a build on this site, because we're going to be able to move this around later on. Once we've got the pose down, we'll be able to really custom fit it to make it look like it's part of his clothing, sort of this area here. But for now, that's what we're going to add. Now, in terms of the gear, once again, I want to do the colouring on his clothing first. I will sort out the base, that's very easy to do. We're going to give him this flagstone texture. We could do the metal base again, but I want to do the flagstone one, and I know that we've already done grenades, but realistically speaking, this is probably the best thing for him. As I've said, these kind of features is far more devoted towards, again, the medieval, or these little things that aren't really ammunition or gun based, which is really what we want for Cloud. We will go with the grenades, and in this instance we're not going to go with the second item. There's really no need, and there's nothing that really fits him, which is unfortunate, but it's fine. I mean, there's kind of this kind of tech stuff up here, which could be quite fun. The cargo crate, will be using that at some point, but not for Cloud. So, with that all said and done, we can really start getting onto the colour. As I said, we'll sort out the pose and the gear in a little bit. Other than one thing, there is one thing I think it'll be nice to have something at his side, and there are a few things we can do. This being the big one, this thing called the Cyber Pack. It's very much just for the look. You know, this doesn't really serve too much of a purpose, but I think it's going to fit quite nicely here. So with that said and done, we're going to get into the colouring. Now, he wears these kind of navy muted colours. We'll sort out his skin tone first, and we'll go with, I think, just this regular human. And obviously we need to change hair colour and stuff, but that's fine for that. So with that, we'll get onto the hair colour stuff, as I mentioned. This is probably the best one we're going to get. The butterscotch blonde is the blondest hair that isn't just white, and we need to get the eyebrows. That's fine. The eye colour, we are going to give him grey eyes. I think that will just fit a little bit better. I'm not sure what colour eyes he has. They might be sort of greyish blue, but we'll go with grey for now, and that will be fine. Now, the rest of him, I'm going to build a little bit of the the stuff at the bottom first. We're just going to go with a basic look here with this flagstone. The metal will come back to. I always forget to do the primer, so we're going to do that now. And those grenades, obviously we want them to be this green colour. There are three aspects to colouring the grenades. There is the main body, there's the sort of handle bit, and there's the pin. The trigger, I should say, and the handle. The handle of the grenade. No, the trigger and the pin. And that will do quite nicely. So we sorted that out. Let me think really quickly. Let's make it slate grey. Let's make it a little bit darker. Perfect. Lovely. Done. Now we can focus on Cloud himself. We're not going to be using too many colours here. We're mostly going to be focusing on dark blues and blacks through a combination of cloth and metal. So, in terms of the cloth aspect of it, this is realistically our best option. This thing called Shaggy Space, it's a very dark navy, and as you can see, it really fits quite nicely with his clothing options. And we're going to try and make this as blue as possible. There's no real reason not to do this. Because that's basically his colour scheme is pretty much as blue as we can. While we'll also just put in a little bit of accenting, I think, with this black, which would go quite nicely in these areas, if I can grab that. Lovely. And these two. Yeah, that's not bad for that, we're going to make the belt black as well, and we're going to make that fully black. We might edit that just a wee bit later on. And of course, for the boots, these want to be fully black too. Like I say, there's not a huge amount of colour going into this, but that's because he doesn't wear a huge amount of colour. And that's fine, you know, they don't all have to be multicoloured. You know, if the character doesn't wear many colours, then you don't give him many colours. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. The gloves, we also want to be these colours as well. We're going to make the outsides and the majority this black. I might throw in some blue just for a little bit of differentiation. So let's go back to that sort of dark navy blue. We'll pop that in there. And we'll pop it in here as well. And that's pretty much that. We're going to make the we're going to bring back the black just to get these sort of armband areas done. And again, that's pretty much his clothing. Like, he wears these muted navies and stuff. Now, for the rest of it, we want to turn more to the metal. We're going to make this attachment. No, it's going to be the same color. So, if we turn to the metal side of things, we're going to be focusing again on, we could go with this sort of thing called Tornadoes of Coals. I prefer possibly the gunmetal, and we're going to make the buckle that, and we'll colour this bit in too. Yeah, that's quite nice. This is kind of just a power pack kind of addition that you don't have to throw on. I want to, because I think it looks quite fun. And we can get these sort of glass colours, and we can edit the inside to make it look all kind of machiny. Difficult to get that little line, but we're going to give it a go. There we go. Yeah, and that's kind of just an accessory that doesn't have to be added, but I quite like the addition of it. Now, this shoulder part. Again, not the easiest one to do in the world, but we're going to focus again on this sort of gunmetal colour. I'm going to add that to those parts. As for the rest of it, this is about as perfect as we can get. This is actually a much better colouring, but I don't know if his armour is particularly metal. We can give it a go and see. Let's see if that looks any better. No, I'm not feeling it. We'll just edit those out and that's fine. A lot of this kind of trial and error, like these parts, these do want to be the gunmetal. And we might play around with those accented bits later on when we're doing the pose, just to see what looks better in the moment. A little sip of tea, and I think that is pretty good. As far as the colour scheme goes, as the clothing, that's looking a bit more like Cloud. Now, of course, if we're talking about Cloud, there is one thing very much missing from this, and I think we all know it's going to be that big Buster Sword. And we can do that. We can really easily do that. If we go on to what's in his hands, we go to the long blades. These long swords, they're not all medieval. They're not all in that kind of time zone. If we look further down the list, we'll start seeing stuff like this, the futuristic longsword, the chainsword, stuff like that. But we're not looking for that. We've got this kind of lovely cyber saber. We've got the flamberge. We've got whatever this is. That's orcish. But scrolling even further down is when we start getting into these. Now, this would be fun, the Monster Slayer, simply for the size. Now, to give you an idea, that's the size of it. It goes way off the screen. Now, Cloud does have a sword that looks like that, certainly in the Final Fantasy VII, I want to say, remake. You know, I've watched my housemate play it a lot, and you can upgrade different swords, and this does look like one of them, but it's not Cloud's sword, is it? Not quite. It's the right size, but it's not what we're looking for, because there is something very specific that we are looking for, and I can't find it. Isn't it always the way? It's around here somewhere. It might even be in the short blade, which is going to give you an idea of how big it actually is, which is not quite the size we would want in an ideal world. And there it is, we scrolled past it. Here we go, the futuristic broadsword. Now, you're going to see a slight change in size. Not massive change in size, and the sword isn't like as broad as we would like, but I mean, there's no doubting That's the Buster Sword. That is Cloud's blade. We all know that. So let's give it a little hint of colour. Now again, we want this kind of gunmetal colouring for these accented parts. The blade itself is going to be this colour. And as for the rest of it, I'm going to do what I like to do and put this kind of red handle in. I like the red handle on the Buster Sword. And we could add it in there, but what I want to do is try and use this part, and it's showing up red there. I want to use this part for the additional things you can put on the sword. I forget what they're called, but there are like powers you can put on the sword, and they're different colours. So what I'm going to do is go back to our Aquatic Elixir Blue and pump that onto there. And that looks more like sort of slot-in additions that we can add to the sword to make it have other powers. And that is going to be the finished Cloud in terms of colour. Now what we want to do is give him a better pose, because that isn't a very Cloud pose, let's be honest with ourselves. But we can make a Cloud pose. Now, we could give him the sort of two-handed thing, but Cloud doesn't wield his sword with two hands very often, you know. He's most likely seen with it in one hand. And I think that this is as good a time as ever to go with the three-point landing pose. Now we're going to see a big change here, and that is very Cloud. Now, this is where we're going to start playing with stuff, because I want the sword to be in a different position, I want his head to be in a different position, and most importantly, I want this shoulder addition to be in a different position, and we can do all of those things. If we go into the advanced section, as you can see up here, we've got all the different options. Stuff like the grenade is fine. We don't need to change that. The sword just edits the position of the sword in the hand. We don't want to do that either. What we want to do is play around with his body parts, as it were. So if we move this, we can tilt the head up, and we do want to do that. We want to tilt it up sort of quite a decent amount, so that he's looking directly forward. This whole three-point landing thing is when they're sort of down and they've landed, and that's what the pose is on the site, but what we want to do is make it so that he's looking up. We want it to be like he's landed, and then he's done that sort of look up and faces his opponent. Now, this pauldron. This is where things get a little finicky and where things get a little bit trial and error, because I always forget what positioning is edited by the twist, bend and tilt options. We're going to give it a go and see what works. Now we don't want to do that, we want to twist it the other way. The bend needs to go like that, it needs to be tilted the other way to that, and then we want to try and move it, no we don't want to do that, we want to do the opposite, we want to move it back in. No, we don't want to slide it, that's the bad wrong thing. Now we can move it backwards a little bit, and that is looking much better. We want to move it back a little further if we can, and maybe just bend it like that, and that is much better already. Already it's looking much more like a shoulder piece to the clothing he's wearing, as opposed to just this additional bit that's raised up way too far. Now the reason we've done this before messing around with the pose is that it gets a little finicky when you start editing these little bits and pieces of the mini. They can reset. It's something that when you make changes to the overall bodywork, it can't save the individual changes you've done for that pose, which is why we're doing this last. But that's much better for the pauldron, for sure, and now we want to edit this sword. It's fine, but I want him to be holding it sort of, no, I'm not going to be able to do this on camera, I want him to be holding it backwards behind him, so that he's sort of landed and he's holding it back and looking up. It's a little bit of an anime kind of thing, but it's not something that is impossible. So we're going to try and play around with that on this arm, the left arm? Oh dear, no. I was going to say, we don't want to do that. It's the right arm that we want to mess with, and so we shall. Now we're going to try and look at him from the above angle, because the other issue with this is that by getting the weapon into a different position, the arm can start looking really messed up, which we don't want to do. We don't want to compromise that. We don't want to have his wrist like off at a broken angle. But we will try and do this. I'm going to actually I've said that with the wrist first. So we want to twist it kind of that way. We do want to get a little bit of a bend on it. And we'll see what we can do with the tilt. Tilt it up a little bit. So now it's facing backwards a little bit more. And we're going to see what we can do with the arm. There's not actually all that much we want to do. It's not bad, but if we tilt the elbow back and maybe move his arm out a little bit, let's see if we can do that. Nope, not that. Maybe the bend, get it up a little higher. No, I think that's fine as it is though. The tilt, oh, that's the wrong way, but that's what we wanted to do. Yeah, that's much better, look at that. So now he's holding it a little bit further out. I would like to have the blade facing backwards. That's going to be quite tricky to do though. And I'm not sure if it's really that doable. We'll see what we can do with the clavicle. No, that's just raising it up and down. Again, we don't want that to happen. The tilt on there is going to move it back. That's not bad. I think maybe. Perhaps if we tilted the wrist bending that, like that, yeah, and then maybe twisting it like that. That's not a bad pose at all. It's now very flat along, which is actually perfect. And that is pretty much gonna be Cloud finished off. We'll zoom in on there, we'll go back to the main page, and that is going to be Cloud pretty much completed. I'm going to scroll out just a touch so that we can get the full thing in and do a 360. So we've got him in that superhero pose. We've got his face looking forward. His expression is basically expressionless. We've got his sword out behind him, as he is known to do when he lands sometimes. As you can see, the accenting there looks decent. I'm quite happy with that. It shows like a little bit of just folding of the material. And it's better that it's material, not the metal colouring, which I think is just going to work nicer with the rest of his clothing. The grenades are sort of scattered around, that's just there for the look. The pauldron, again, is looking much more like part of his clothing, as opposed to just a random addition. And that is going to be Cloud Strife, pretty much finished. So yeah, that's going to be it from this one. Cloud is done. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope that you've enjoyed. Remember, if there are any characters you want to see me create using this sort of setup, let me know in the comment section down below. Hit me up on Twitter. You can always catch me there. I've got a couple of Twitter links in the description as well. You can find it there. Also in the description you will find links to Hero Forge, the site I am using for all your TTRPG minifig needs. That is the site for me. I think it's probably the site for you as well if that's your bag. You'll also find a link to Tulok the Barbarian, the channel that gave me the inspiration to do this series. I suggest you check that out for various video game, TV, movie character builds. But that's going to be it from me. I've rambled on for far too long once again. So, my final thank you to you all for watching. And I guess with that, I'll see you next time. Laters.